Attention startup leaders. Are you strapped for time but hungry for strategic insights? Introducing Managed Chaos, your go-to podcast for navigating the startup world in less time than your morning commute. Join us as we share expert advice, real-world examples, and actionable strategies to help you scale your business, allocate resources effectively, and achieve visionary results. Tune into Managed Chaos and join a community of like-minded innovators on the path to entrepreneurial success.
Typically, the operations required to run your company are seen as mere cost centers. This raises an intriguing question. How can you turn your operational spend into a powerhouse of return on investment? Welcome to Managed Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Rachel Anderson.
And I'm Katrina Purcell.
And today we are maximizing your operational dollars. So, how can organizations effectively identify and prioritize their resources to maximize that operational efficiency that we really all want?
I feel like this might not be that much of a fun topic, but we're going to turn it into a fun topic today.
I like it already.
Yeah, if you already have resources in place. So let's say you've already gotten started, you've already kind of amassed a team, and you're taking a look at your efficiency and you're saying, wow, we don't seem that efficient. So the first thing to do would really be an audit of sort of the skill sets of the people that you have on your team. So start to understand, what are people good at? What do they like to do? What are things that they excel at? Because I think when you put your team into things where they excel, you're actually going to get a lot more productivity out of them. They're going to become more efficient because they like what they're doing. So basically getting a little creative on sort of what roles you have people assigned to, making sure that people understand what the processes are, making sure that they're very clear on what their role is. The other thing is really deciding what those key operational goals actually are, and then ensuring that those projects are the ones that get fully resourced. So I have an example here from a client where they had some operational goals, but those were actually not the projects that were fully resourced. The projects that were fully resourced were the projects where the skill sets of the team were aligned with what the project needed. And so what happened was these projects, which were the most important projects to their operational efficiency, essentially went unstarted because they didn't have the right people to do them. And they were searching, trying to figure out how to get these done. Do we hire someone full time? And then they spent a long time searching for this unicorn person who would be able to do this project, instead of either upskilling their team or starting to chip away at pieces of the project that someone, who already was on the team could do. And it really was detrimental to their long-term operations, and including the implementation of a really big customer that they had. And so, that which is funded gets done. And so in the case of this, it's just because you say something is a priority. If you don't fund it, if you don't find the right team, if you don't get the right skills, it's not actually going to get done, right? And so, taking a look at what are the things that take the longest, what are the things that have a lot of, person power thrown at them, and how can you start to maximize that time that's being spent? How can you make things happen faster? And that's if you've already got sort of your team in place.
I think that's a really good example of some of the pitfalls, especially to trying to be efficient without the full buy-in of being efficient. And you made me think of this conversation I had literally yesterday with a revenue director. So they handle the sales and marketing for this company. And he had been assigned 2 leading projects that were from the CEO, highest priority. And going through trying to be efficient with his employees, with all the things, he made a plan, he was putting things together. Everything needed to align into those business goals. And then the next day, there was a new project that was like, no, this is top priority. Everything else doesn't matter, right? And so there's this misalignment of even the expectation from the very highest person of what actually is the goal, is the priority, and therefore, how do we get buy-in for efficiency for fill in the blank, right? And so that moving metric can really harm your looking for efficiencies in a business and turning it over. So buy-in is really what I'm saying.
It really is
critical.
the most efficient thing you can do to your team is constantly change your priorities, because it means that your team is never finishing anything. There's a real cost to sort of context switching, to having people fully bought in on a project and then dragging them quickly onto something else. It causes a lot of turmoil, and there's literally nothing that can make a team more inefficient than constantly changing priorities.
Yeah. It's so important. I feel like I could just land on this for a while, but I think you mentioned something else that's really important, which is sort of around resources, but in a really tangible way to the business. So thinking through not just your employees and the process, but also the physical things it takes, the software and the hardware, to become efficient or be efficient. What role does that technology play in really maximizing resources in operations? And even further, how can organizations stay ahead of some of those advancements and needs as they look to efficiency?
So technology is definitely a critical enabler for maximizing your resources, but I often find that people feel like technology is just going to solve everything. And in reality, if you don't understand what your processes are, if you don't have them documented, you can't automate them. You can't, start to think about ways to make them more efficient. So you definitely have to get those processes documented, really documenting them agnostic of the people and agnostic of any technology you currently have, so that you're able to really truly have a picture of what is the process independent of whatever external factors we've applied to it, right? And so oftentimes when people create a process, they might think, well, we have Sally over here and Sally's really good at this. So even though it's not technically in her job scope, we're going to keep having her do this part of the process. And slowly over time, guess what? Sally quits or Sally gets promoted. And then the new person comes in and they don't have the same skill set as her. And they're not able to do the two parts of the process that she used to do. And you have to rethink everything. So it's really important to create that process independent of whatever technology you have. And that way you can start to think about, how do I actually automate this? What pieces of this process are boring and I really don't want to have a human have to interact with it? And I could actually make their job more exciting if I gave them more thoughtful work. The other thing is really reviewing the industry trends, right? Like, so keeping up with the Joneses. Investing in your employees' continuous learning, making sure that you're definitely sending them to conferences and seminars, and that they know that they're able to come back with information and things to try and test out. And so I spent a good portion of my career at Bloomberg, and one of the things that they really did was like fail fast, right? So try something really, if it fails, great, you learn something and move on. But do it quickly, right? Don't talk about something for 6 months before you even try it and then fail, because you've wasted that whole time up until that point. Definitely regular training, celebrating those small wins, recognizing if you have an employee who comes to you and they say, hey, I think this process could be improved. If only we did XYZ, try it out. And then if it works, celebrating that, right? And talking to the rest of the people in the company about that contribution, because it really starts to highlight for your team, hey, we're not set in our ways. We don't necessarily believe that everything we've done is exactly right. And we're open to your feedback. We're open to trying new stuff. We're open to new technology. As things evolve, you're going to get release notes for all of your different softwares that you have. Reading those release notes, understanding how those new things that are coming out in the products that you use could be beneficial to your process. And that goes back to what I said at the beginning. If you have your process documented, you're able to look at those release notes and say, hey, actually, we're not using this part of the product in the process. We should, now that they've changed, something that we were looking for.
Yeah, SOPs can be such critical documents to really making sure that you have full utilization over the tools that you currently have in your portfolio before scaling out. But I also want to just touch more on one other thing you said, because I have seen it as one of the most common ways that businesses don't become efficient. So I just really so good. I want to make sure that we really touch on it. So I call it the suspension of belief in your reality. And this is not for everybody, meaning there are special people who can specifically think in a world or a universe that doesn't currently exist. And so there are people who think black and white, and that's super helpful. There are people that see exactly what currently is and exists and can figure out future states with that or processes or whatever, and that is super useful. And there are people that can ideate sort of a narrative that doesn't exist yet, and put that into being. And that's where I think sometimes consultants can be really helpful when they have that unique specialty, right? If you don't have that on your existing team. And so what that looks like is exactly what you talked about. It's withholding the suspension of your belief of what currently is. We've always done it this way, or this is this tool set we have, and we have to find a way to work within that, or these are the people we have, and we're restrained to that. As you're looking at efficiencies, it is a much, much, much better way to evolve that. If you say, what is the ideal future? Just hard stop on that. Make that idea, need, process, whatever, and then find out how everybody flows into that and where your gaps are and things like that. But that suspension of belief in your current reality is so, so important. So with that, organizations are looking for all kinds of different professionals and kind of hiring to really maximize their operational efficiencies. And maybe I kind of stole the thunder a little bit, but what key skills, what key skills do they need to possess, or should you be looking for? How do you hire that kind of a role or person that really understands efficiencies?
Right. So it goes back to sort of what you were saying earlier, right? You want them to be an expert in their field, but they also really need to be adaptable, right? They need to be innovative. They need to be able to take a situation and really think about what does that look like if the current reality doesn't exist. They should really have strong analytical skills. Potentially they have, a methodology around process improvement like Lean Six Sigma, data analysts, right? So that we can start to really understand what does it mean to make data-driven decisions. That's one of my favorite sort of misnomers. We're making data-driven decisions. Great. Where's the data? Well, we don't have it, but we know that this is right. So you need the people who have those skills, who are able to take your data and turn it into something important. Those are kind of the hard skills. There's also the soft skills, right? They need to be good at problem solving. When we were growing up, we had this thing called Odyssey of the Mind. It was OM in school, and they would create these ridiculous problems. And every week you'd have to get together with your team and sort of solve these problems. And, I think we've lost that, right? Kids now are playing video games and things like that, but you need people who can kind of take a big problem and chip away at it. They need to be good at communicating. They need to be collaborative. They need to be able to take feedback from others. The other piece is sort of being creative about where you find these people. So oftentimes I see companies get really stuck because they have to hire someone full-time. And hiring someone full-time is a big commitment. It's a big cost to your bottom line. It's also a really big decision. When in reality, you could potentially find interns, right? Local universities, especially if you're in a big city, local business schools, right? They've got students constantly that are looking for internships or that are looking for a way to get school credit, and oftentimes are kind of learning about the latest and the greatest and could then bring that back to your company. Another thing is something you and I both know well, which is sort of fractional work, right? So it's less consulting and more in your business, but potentially at sort of a part-time or a fraction of what the both cost and time would be of hiring someone full-time. So really thinking through, if someone has the skills, but maybe this thing you need them to come in and do wouldn't be a full-time job anyway. And so you could bring somebody in who could do the job faster, who's got the experience, who could get hands-on keys with your team. And then there is the side piece of actual consulting work, right? So having someone come in, evaluate, and at least give you some ideas, and then having your team run with sort of implementing and what that could look like. But I think we oftentimes tend to think, I want a full-time employee because I want to say I have this many full-time employees, and or I want their full undivided attention. And I have news for you. Even if someone's a full-time employee, most likely you don't have their full undivided attention anyway. So wouldn't it be better to enter the arrangement knowing up front that, they're not giving you their full-time work, but that they are getting things from all the different clients they're working with, and they're able to bring them into your organization and help you to kind of understand and see other opportunities that you may not see right in front of you.
Yeah, it's perfect. So there's so many ways to really look at efficiencies and how to get that for your business, whether it's internally or externally. I think the conversation around creativity is a really undersold one when it comes to being efficient. So I really like that you ended on that. And we will pick up the conversation next time on the next episode of Manage Chaos Podcast.
This was another informative episode of Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps, as well as on Instagram and YouTube, where we are at Managed Chaos Podcast. For additional resources or to continue the conversation, you can find Katrina Purcell and Rachel Anderson on LinkedIn.